Here's the story of the people of the elephant, an army led by a formidable chief named Abraha al-Ashram. From the highlands of Abyssinia, this expedition set forth toward a sacred objective, the house of Allah in Mecca. Their intention? To raise the most revered sanctuary of Arabia. To accomplish this unthinkable act, they brought with them a terrifying weapon of war, a colossal elephant. But why such an expedition? What drove Abraha to thus defy the divine will? It all began when Abraha, Christian governor of Abyssinia in Yemen, had a sumptuous church built. He dreamed of making it the new pilgrimage center for the Arabs, thus replacing the Kaaba. Yet, despite all its grandeur, his church remained deserted. The Arab tribes continued, generation after generation, to turn toward the sacred house of Allah. Furious at this failure, Abraha made a mad decision. If the Arabs will not come to my church, then I will destroy their Kaaba. But Allah, mighty and majestic, did not leave this affront unpunished. From the sky, he sent down upon Abraha and his soldiers a devastating punishment that annihilated them to the last man. What are the details of this extraordinary account? How did the elephant react when it approached the sanctuary? Who really was this Abraha the Abyssinian? And what was the reaction of Abdul, the grandfather of Prophet Muhammad? May the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, in the face of this arrogant invader. Let us go back together to the origins of this conflict. The story begins well before Abraha's march in the mountains of Yemen. A tyrannical king by the name of Nuwas then ruled over the region. This cruel man persecuted the Christians of Najran solely because they had embraced faith in the one God. In an act of unprecedented barbarity, Nuwas had an immense trench dug which he filled with flames. Then he threw hundreds of living believers into it. Men, women, children, all burned for their faith. But one man escaped the massacre, Dawsdu. Consumed by the horror of what he had seen, he fled and traveled to Syria to meet the Roman Emperor Caesar. There, before the imperial court, he recounted the terrible crimes of Nuwas and begged the emperor to avenge the martyrs of Yemen. The emperor listened to him gravely and responded, "Your cause is just, and helping you would be a duty, but our lands are too far away to intervene directly." Rather than refuse, Caesar then wrote to the Negus, the powerful Christian king of Abyssinia, whose kingdom was located on the other side of the Red Sea, much closer to Yemen. He asked him to bring his support to Dawes and to punish the tyrant. The Negus responded favorably. He raised an imposing army of 70,000 men, which he entrusted to 2 generals. The troops crossed the sea on warships and landed in Yemen. The battle was brutal. The army of Nuwas, despite its ferocity, could not resist the Abyssinian power. Cornered, the tyrant attempted one last escape and threw himself into the waves where he drowned. Thus ended the bloody reign of Nuwas. The Abyssinians settled in Yemen. Their initial mission was accomplished, but what was supposed to be a liberation would soon transform into a new oppression. A few years passed. The 2 generals, Aryat and Abraha, governed Yemen together in the name of the Negus. But Abraha's ambition and thirst for power grew. He could no longer bear to share authority. A conflict broke out between the 2 men. Each gathered his supporters, and soon 2 enemy armies faced each other, ready to kill each other. When the news reached the Negus, he was dismayed. To avoid useless bloodshed, he proposed a solution, a single duel between Aryat and Abraha. The victor would obtain absolute power over Yemen. The soldiers would not have to die for a quarrel between chiefs. the two generals accepted. On the day of combat, the two men advanced face to face. Aryat struck first. His lance cut through the air and struck Abraha right in the face, a terrible wound that opened his eyebrow, tore his nose and split his upper lip. Blood gushed. Abraha staggered. But at that precise instant, a faithful servant of Abraha emerged from nowhere. With a lightning blade stroke, he struck down Aryat, who collapsed, dead on the spot. Abraha, despite his horrible wound, survived. This deep scar earned him his nickname, al-Ashram. Thus, Abraha became the undisputed master of Yemen. But his ambition did not stop there. Now alone in power, Abraha wanted to impose his religion on all of Arabia. For this he imagined a grandiose project to build the most beautiful church ever seen, an edifice so majestic that it would divert the Arabs from their pilgrimage to Mecca. He therefore had a colossal cathedral erected. The walls were built with the rarest marbles, torn from the ancient palaces of the Queen of Sheba, Bilqis. The doors were plated with pure gold. Inside, massive crosses of gold and silver sparkled under the light. Never had Arabia seen such architectural splendor. Once the church was completed, Abraha, drunk with pride, wrote to the Negus, "I have built for you a church such that no king before you has possessed, and I swear that I will not stop until I have diverted the Arabs' pilgrimage toward this sanctuary." When these words reached the ears of the Arab tribes, a wave of anger swept across the entire peninsula. How could a foreigner dare to defy the sacred house of Allah? How could he pretend to replace the Kaaba, built by the prophet Ibrahim himself? A man from the tribe of Kinana, burning with rage for the honor of the house of Allah, decided to act. He traveled secretly to Abraha's church, and there, in the middle of the night, he committed an act of extreme provocation. He defiled the sanctuary by relieving himself in it, thus expressing all the contempt he felt for this impious construction. When Abraha discovered what had happened, he entered an apocalyptic fury. Trembling with rage, he made a terrible oath. "I will march on Mecca, and with my own hands I will destroy their Kaaba stone by stone." Abraha took action. He assembled a formidable army, and to carry out the destruction of the sanctuary, he brought an extraordinary weapon of war, a gigantic elephant. This massive beast, which no Arab had ever seen, was to be used to overturn the walls of the Kaaba. The army set out, crossing deserts and mountains. On their way, courageous Arab tribes tried to bar their route. Among them, a valiant chief named Nufayl ibn Habib gathered his warriors and confronted the invader. But faced with the overwhelming power of Abraha's army, and especially faced with the elephant that terrorized the horses and trampled everything in its path, resistance was futile. Nufayl was captured. To save his life, he accepted reluctantly to guide Abraha through the Arab lands to Mecca. Other tribes still tried to oppose. All were swept aside. The army advanced, implacable, toward the sacred heart of Arabia. Mecca was now within reach. The fate of the Kaaba seemed sealed. Abraha's army finally reached Al-Mugammas, a valley situated in the immediate proximity of Mecca. The sacred sanctuary was now within reach. Before launching the final assault, Abraha decided to terrorize the inhabitants. He sent one of his lieutenants, al-Aswad ibn Maqsud, with the mission to pillage the surroundings and seize everything of value. Al-Aswad's horsemen swept over the pastures around Mecca. They seized entire herds, including 200 magnificent camels. These beasts belonged to a man of great prestige. Al-Muttalib ibn Hashim, the undisputed Lord of Quraysh and grandfather of Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. The message was clear. Abraha would stop at nothing. Abraha then dispatched an emissary named Hunada to the chiefs of Mecca. The messenger presented himself before the notables of Quraysh and declared in a firm voice, "My master Abraha makes this known to you. We have not come to fight you. Our sole objective is to destroy the Kaaba. If you do not resist, we will spare your blood. Otherwise, you will all perish." An icy silence fell over the assembly. The Meccans knew they could not face such an army. Their only chance lay in diplomacy. al-Muttalib, respected chief of Quraysh, then decided to go in person to Abraha's camp. He departed, dignified and serene, accompanied by a few notables. When al-Muttalib entered Abraha's tent, the Abyssinian conqueror was immediately struck by the majestic bearing of this man. His natural presence, his assured gaze, and his evident nobility compelled respect. Abraha said to himself internally, "Here is a man of stature." He expected the Arab chief to implore mercy for the Kaaba, to negotiate the life of the sanctuary, to beg for the sacred house. But al-Muttalib took the floor and said simply, "Your soldiers have seized 200 of my camels. I have come to ask you to return them to me." Abraha was dumbfounded. He could not believe his ears. This man, facing the imminent destruction of the spiritual heart of his people, spoke only of camels? Abraha responded, disappointed and irritated. "You had impressed me when you entered. But now, you have just lost all value in my eyes. How can you speak to me of your camels and say nothing of this house, which is nevertheless your religion and that of your ancestors, when I have come to destroy it utterly?" al-Muttalib looked him straight in the eyes and then pronounced a phrase that would traverse the centuries. "As for the camels, I am their owner, their lord. As for the house, it has a lord who will protect it." These words resonated in the tent. Abraha understood. al-Muttalib placed his total trust in Allah, the true protector of the Kaaba. The camels he could defend, but the sacred house? It was in the hands of the Almighty. Abraha, troubled but determined, ordered that the camels be returned to al-Muttalib. Then he resumed his preparations. His army settled in the valley of Muhasir, at the very gates of Mecca. The decisive moment approached. Dawn rose on a day that no one would ever forget. Abraha gave the final order. Let the elephant advance. Let it march toward the Kaaba and destroy it. The soldiers struck the colossal beast with sticks and shouted orders. The elephant, accustomed to obeying, was supposed to direct itself toward the sanctuary. But suddenly, against all expectation, the animal knelt down. It categorically refused to advance toward Mecca. The soldiers redoubled their violence. They struck it with lances, whips, iron hooks. Nothing worked. The elephant remained immobile, as if nailed to the ground. They then tried another tactic. They turned the beast toward Yemen, toward the south. Immediately, the elephant stood up and began to walk at a rapid pace, almost joyful. They then directed it toward Syria, toward the north. Once again, the animal advanced without hesitation. But as soon as they turned it toward Mecca, toward the Kaaba, it immobilized again, as if frozen by an invisible force. Abraha was furious. His men persisted with the beast, and it was then that the sky darkened. Suddenly, from the side of the Red Sea, a strange phenomenon appeared. Swarms of birds emerged on the horizon, obscuring the sky like a living cloud. They arrived in successive waves, in tight formations, Tehran Abābīl, innumerable flocks. Each bird carried 3 stones, 1 in the beak and 2 clutched in its talons. These stones were not ordinary. They were made of hardened baked clay, sigil, and each bore engraved the name of the one it was to strike. The birds swooped down on the army. The stones fell like a rain of death. The Holy Qur'an relates this extraordinary event in Surah al-Fil. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the people of the elephant? Did he not make their stratagem completely vain? And he sent against them birds in flocks, which pelted them with stones of baked clay, and he made them like chewed straw. These stones, similar in their effect to modern projectiles, pierced bodies with devastating force. They burned flesh from the inside, consuming entrails. The soldiers collapsed, reduced to empty carcasses, like dead leaves crushed by the wind. Some fell struck down on the spot. Others, seized with panic, tried to flee in all directions, screaming in terror. They desperately sought Nufail, their guide, to find the way back. But the confusion was total. The punishment of Allah was implacable. Abraha himself was not spared. A stone struck him. Seriously wounded, he was hastily evacuated by his surviving soldiers. But barely had they left the valley when his body began to decompose, while he was still alive. His fingers fell one after another, phalanx by phalanx. Flows of pus and blood gushed from his wounds. His body rotted from the inside, as if gnawed by an invisible evil. When they finally reached Sana'a in Yemen, the decomposition had reached his chest. His rib cage slowly split, revealing his beating heart. He died in atrocious suffering. The man who had dared to defy the house of Allah breathed his last breath, annihilated by divine punishment. As for the elephant's driver and his groom, Allah struck them with a different punishment. He made them blind and infirm. Unable to leave, they remained in Mecca, reduced to begging for their food on the roads, living witnesses of divine wrath. Thus ended the story of the people of the elephant, an eternal lesson. No one can defy the will of Allah. The Kaaba was miraculously protected, and that year, the year of the elephant, became a historical marker for all of Arabia. It was this same year that Muhammad was born. May the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, the last of the prophets. Thus did Allah, glory and purity to him, protect his sacred house from certain destruction. Through a striking miracle, he annihilated Abraha's army and preserved the sanctuary that his prophet Ibrahim had raised centuries before. And this divine protection was not a coincidence. Allah was preparing this sacred place to welcome an event that would change the course of humanity. The birth of the master of the children of Adam, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. May the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. That year became known throughout Arabia as the Year of the Elephant. It was in this blessed year that the final prophet was born, the messenger of mercy for the worlds. The Kaaba was preserved to become the point of convergence for millions of believers, and to see born in its shadow the one who would bring to the world the ultimate message of Allah. Dear brothers and sisters, we arrive at the end of this extraordinary account. May this story fortify your faith, strengthen your trust in Allah, and remind you that the Almighty is always with those who place their trust in Him. If this account has touched your heart, if these lessons have resonated in you, then share this video with your loved ones. Like it, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell so as not to miss any of our next accounts. Insha'Allah. Never forget, behind every trial lies divine wisdom, behind every difficulty an ease, and Allah is always with the patient. Glory and praise to you, O Allah. I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except you. I implore your forgiveness and I repent to you. Allah is the most knowing of all things. May the peace, blessing, and favors of Allah be upon our Master Muhammad, as well as upon his family and all his companions. Remain under the protection of Allah and in his security. May he keep you, bless you, and grant you all good. May the peace, mercy of Allah and his blessings be upon you all.